The day I found them laughing at me, my wife, the woman I'd devoted my life to, and her secret boyfriend, a man I never saw coming, something inside me shattered. It wasn't just the heartache of betrayal. It was the cruel reality that while I scrambled to pay our mortgage, hustling overtime and swallowing my pride, they were reveling in my desperation. Their laughter echoed from the living room like a twisted soundtrack, mocking every sacrifice I'd ever made. I stood there, invisible yet burning with an anger so fierce it felt like flames licking at my insides. I didn't confront them that day. I couldn't. The weight of my shame anchored me in place, eyes burning, stomach churning, as I realized the life I believed in was crumbling beneath my feet. Then, a few days later, a letter arrived. The mocking laughter haunted me long after that afternoon. I heard it in my nightmares, felt it every time I fumbled with my wallet to scrounge up enough for groceries, or refueled my aging sedan at the cheapest gas station in town. I suppose I should have confronted them then and there, but the humiliation was too raw. My own wife, sharing a private joke with a man who was neither friend nor family, had turned me into a prop for their twisted sense of humor. We had married 5 years prior, in a small backyard ceremony. I still remember how she looked under the flickering lights that night, the way her eyes brimmed with promise, her hair swept back in an elegant twist. We were both so certain that we could conquer the world together, that no hardship would be too great if we faced it side by side. But now that memory felt like a cruel mirage. The giggles coming from the living room told me everything I needed to know. She'd found someone else. And he was comfortable enough in our home, my home, to laugh openly at my misery. A deep ache settled into my chest, an invisible bruise I couldn't soothe. Bills had been piling up for months. Late mortgage notices stacked on the kitchen counter, each one more urgent than the last. I'd been running myself ragged, picking up every shift I could get at the warehouse. Meanwhile, she'd grown distant, claiming exhaustion, mood swings, or simply ignoring my attempts to connect. I never imagined she was funneling our household secrets to someone else, giving him front row seats to watch me flounder. I couldn't bear to sleep in the same bed after I witnessed them together. That night, I pretended I had an early start and crashed on the old recliner in the den. She didn't ask why. Maybe she knew. Maybe she didn't care. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, mind spinning with 1,000 questions. How long had this been going on? Was he her coworker? Some old flame from her past? Why couldn't she tell me we were in trouble, that she was unhappy? The next morning, she acted as if nothing had happened. No mention of laughter, no mention of a visitor. I couldn't meet her eyes, afraid she'd see the hurt and fury roiling inside me. I mumbled something about heading to work early and left. On the drive to the warehouse, I nearly pulled over twice, overwhelmed by the urge to scream or weep. My life, the one I'd promised to build on mutual trust and love, felt like a rickety house of cards. At work, I slogged through the day in a fog, stacking crates and dodging the pitying glances of coworkers who noticed how haggard I looked. Ricky, the forklift driver, cornered me during lunch. "You good, man?" he asked, concern etched in his features. I wanted to confide in someone, anyone, about the betrayal I'd discovered, but the words wouldn't come. My marriage was my private matter, right? So I just shrugged and forced a half-hearted grin. "Just tired," I said, my throat tight with lies. I managed to dodge any real conversation for the next few days. She and I lived under the same roof like strangers. She worked as a receptionist at a local dental office, or so she told me. She'd come home late, claiming the doctor needed her for extra paperwork. I never asked if that was true or if she was out with him. Maybe I was too scared to hear the answer. But then the letter arrived. It was a Monday afternoon, sweltering hot, with the sun beating down mercilessly. The mail was piled in the box, and usually I'd sort through it in the safety of the house. But something compelled me to sift through the envelopes while still standing at the curb. Bill, junk flyer, more junk, and then a plain envelope with no return address. My name scribbled in shaky handwriting. I tore it open, expecting some scam. Instead, I found a single sheet of paper with a few typed lines. "I know what your wife is doing. She's not just mocking you. She's setting you up. Be careful. Watch your back." No signature. No clue who sent it. My heart hammered. I reread the words, each sentence a cryptic warning, a lifeline of truth or a cruel trick. I couldn't tell which. My hands trembled, threatening to tear the paper further. "She's setting you up." Setting me up for what? My first instinct was to run inside and demand an explanation. But reason prevailed. She'd simply deny it, throw me a sneer, and laugh behind my back again with that boyfriend of hers. Instead, I tucked the note into my back pocket and stepped inside, mind reeling with suspicion. She wasn't home yet, so I had the place to myself. Well, Me in the oppressive silence that had settled over every surface. I paced the living room, scanning for anything that might confirm the letter's warning. Nothing jumped out at me. The same sagging couch, the same chipped coffee table, the same half-dead plant in the corner. Yet it all felt foreign, like I was trespassing in a life I no longer recognized. I thought about searching her drawers, rummaging for phone records, or receipts that might point to her whereabouts. But I stopped myself, partly out of respect for the love we once shared and partly because fear gnawed at me. What if I found proof of something far worse than just an affair? Over the next week, I waited for more letters or some sign of the mysterious warning. Every time the mailman came, my heart sped up, only to sink when no new message appeared. Meanwhile, the situation at home deteriorated. She hardly spoke to me except to drop blunt statements about finances or dinner plans. If I pressed for details about her day, she brushed me off. If I tried to kiss her cheek, she recoiled as though I carried a disease. And at night, I heard hushed phone calls in the hallway, her tone low and urgent, followed by that muffled laughter that stabbed me in the gut. Finally, I decided I needed advice. I couldn't keep suffering in silence. Late on a Tuesday, I drove across town to see my older brother, Logan. We'd never been extraordinarily close, but he'd always had a knack for cutting through the noise and offering blunt truths. I didn't tell him about the letter right away, I just spilled everything else. The mortgage stress, the missing wife, the laughter with some unknown man. Logan listened, arms folded, jaw tight, occasionally letting out a curse under his breath. When I finished, he shook his head. "She's not even hiding it, man. You gotta do something. This isn't a partnership anymore, it's a joke at your expense." I sighed, shoulders sagging. What do? Confront her? Kick her out? We still have months of mortgage to pay, and if she leaves, I'm screwed alone on the bills. Logan rubbed at his temples. You're already screwed, brother. She's draining your energy and your money, laughing with some side piece on the sly. If you wait, you might end up deeper in debt or worse. Maybe talk to a lawyer? His words echoed in my head. A lawyer. That sounded so final, like admitting the marriage was dead. Maybe it was. But then I remembered the letter, folded carefully in my wallet. Something about it told me to keep it a secret, even from Logan. She's setting you up. If that was true, then going to a lawyer might be the best step. But I wasn't ready yet, not without more evidence. I drove home that night feeling slightly lighter after venting to Logan, but also carrying a kernel of dread. If I confronted her, would she twist it to her advantage? If she truly was setting me up, I might be walking straight into her plan. My phone buzzed on the seat beside me, another automated mortgage reminder, no doubt. The final late notice was due, and the mortgage company threatened foreclosure if I didn't pay up soon. My savings were almost gone, devoured by medical bills from my sprained ankle last year and the creeping cost of living. The next day, a coworker named Melissa approached me during our shift. She was a quiet type, sweet in her own way, and had been working with me for nearly a year. "You look rough," she said, concern lacing her voice. "Everything okay at home?" I started to brush her off, but something in her earnest eyes stopped me. I shrugged, muttering about money troubles. She frowned, lowering her voice. "I heard a rumor you're behind on mortgage payments. If you ever need a short loan or something." I cut her off, not wanting pity. "I'll figure it out. But, thanks." She hesitated, like she wanted to say more, then nodded and left me to the hum of machinery. The brief exchange kindled an ember of shame. Everyone could see I was struggling, but only I knew the deeper betrayal at play. I put my head down and worked twice as hard that day, moving boxes, sorting inventory, anything to numb my thoughts. That evening, I got home to find my wife gone. A single note on the kitchen counter read, "Out with friends. Don't wait up." That was it. Cold and different. I slumped into the chair, my bones aching from labor, my mind tangled in regrets. The fridge was nearly empty. 2 slices of bread, a half-eaten container of takeout, and no sign of groceries. I realized she'd stopped buying groceries weeks ago, leaving me to scramble for dinner every night. I was about to heat the last slice of pizza when my phone buzzed. Another unknown number, likely spam. I almost ignored it, but something compelled me to answer. On the other end was a voice, muffled by static. "You get my letter?" it asked, words clipped and urgent. My pulse quickened. The letter. So it wasn't just a prank. "Who is this?" I demanded, stepping away from the kitchen. "That's not important," the person replied, the voice distorted, like they were using some filter or cheap speaker. "I know what your wife's planning. You need to protect yourself. She's in deeper than you think." My stomach churned. This sounded like a bad spy movie, but the seriousness in the voice sent goosebumps crawling up my arms. "Tell me more," I insisted. What is she planning? A ragged exhale hissed through the line. Fraud. Maybe identity theft. She's forging your signature on something. Heard she's been bragging about a big score. I thought you should know. My mind reeled. She's forging my signature? On what? The mortgage documents? Some new credit line? My breath caught in my throat. Who are you? I pressed, urgency thrumming in my veins. Just someone who doesn't like seeing you set up, the voice said. Then the line went dead. I stared at the phone screen, heart pounding. Fraud. Identity theft. My wife. The notion of her forging my signature sent a surge of anger through me so intense I thought I might throw up. Could this be real? She was out right now, probably with her boyfriend, laughing at my cluelessness while planning to push me further into financial ruin. The letter's cryptic warning about her setting me up now rang with terrifying clarity. I rushed to my desk, fumbling for the mortgage documents, the credit card bills, anything official. My signature was scrawled in half a dozen places, but I scoured each page, comparing the lines, the ink, the stamps. Nothing looked blatantly suspicious. Yet, the thought that she might have used my personal information to open new accounts or refinance the house behind my back kept me awake that night. Sleep was impossible. My mind conjured worst-case scenarios. Watching the bank seize my home, rummaging through trash in a panic, a court date looming over me. The next morning, still bleary-eyed from lack of rest, I forced myself into action. First, I checked my credit reports online, searching for any new lines of credit opened in my name. My gut twisted as I waited for the screen to load, expecting the worst. But the report looked normal. No suspicious new loans, no sudden credit cards. A small relief, but only temporary. If she was forging something, maybe it hadn't processed yet. Or perhaps it was a different angle, one I hadn't considered. By midday, I was chewing my nails, torn between confronting her and continuing to gather proof. My phone buzzed again, a text from Logan. How you holding up? Found any solid proof? My finger hovered over the keyboard, itching to tell him about the strange phone call. But the fear of sharing too much too soon held me back. What if this was all a hoax? What if I was leaping to conclusions that could ruin my marriage beyond repair? Then I remembered the mocking. The hush-hush phone calls. The letter. The voice last night. The secret boyfriend. If anything was going to ruin my marriage, it was already happening. The question was whether I could salvage my own future. I can't just sit idle, I thought. That evening, I poked around her desk drawers while she was showering. My hands shook as I leafed through scattered receipts, old photos, random trinkets. My heart nearly stopped when I found a stack of documents clipped together, hidden under a notebook. On top was an application for a home equity line of credit, our home. Staring at it, I felt my world tilt. We'd never discussed taking out a second loan. The scrawled signature at the bottom looked suspiciously like mine. My chest tightened, a wave of nausea rolling through me. She was using our house as collateral, forging my consent, gambling with the last stable asset we had left. Footsteps in the hallway made my blood run cold. I slid the documents back, heart hammering like a drum. She walked in, hair damp, barely giving me a glance as she rummaged through her purse. Does she suspect I know? My pulse thundered. Her phone chimed, and she shot me a fleeting glance before wandering off to answer it in another room, door closed behind her. Probably him. Probably laughing at how clueless I was. Fury threaded through my veins, but I forced myself to remain calm. I needed a plan, not a reckless confrontation. As I mulled over my next steps, the mortgage statements on the kitchen counter caught my eye again. We were one payment away from foreclosure. Was she planning to default, let the bank take the house and walk away with some illicitly obtained loan money? The very idea made my stomach roil. I stood there, breathing raggedly, realizing I had to act fast, before she trapped me in a financial disaster that could follow me for years. I placed a hurried call to my brother, voice shaking. Logan, I whispered, mindful that she might eavesdrop, I found something. She's forging my signature on a home equity loan. I'm sure of it. I need help. His response was immediate and emphatic. You're staying at my place tonight. Grab what you can, don't tip her off, and come here. We'll figure out the rest. My heart thudded with relief. I didn't want a screaming match or a reckless confrontation. I wanted to escape her trap, gather evidence, and shield myself from her twisted scheme. And maybe, just maybe, if that letter's sender was right, I could unravel her plan entirely. Stepping into the bedroom, I found her perched on the bed, phone in hand, a small smile twisting her lips. She didn't even glance at me. Texting him, no doubt. My rage simmered, but I pushed it down. With forced nonchalance, I grabbed a duffel bag and tossed in some clothes, a few essentials. She barely acknowledged me, too absorbed in whatever conversation was lighting up her screen. For a second, my chest tightened at the memory of how we used to laugh together once upon a time. But that was gone, replaced by this vile situation. Bag in hand, I walked out the front door, uncertain if she even cared that I was leaving. Each step to the car felt like a hammer pounding nails into the coffin of our marriage. Yet, as I gripped the steering wheel, I felt a surge of determination. I won't be her pawn. Whatever game she was playing, I'd expose it. Even if it meant losing the house, even if it meant unveiling the ugly truth to friends and family, I refused to be the passive victim any longer. Halfway down the block, I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting her to come running out, or her secret boyfriend to appear. But the street was quiet, basked in the soft glow of streetlights. My chest tightened with a swirl of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. A part of me still clung to the memory of the woman I once adored. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone who laughed at my struggles and plotted to steal the only security I had left. As I drove toward Logan's, my phone rang again, another unknown number. My pulse spiked, hands clammy around the steering wheel. Was it the same voice? Or was it her boyfriend calling to gloat? I took a shaky breath and answered, dread coiled in my stomach. Hello? A brief silence crackled. Then came the same muffled voice from before. You're taking the first step. Good. Get out while you can. A pause, as though the caller was mulling over what else to say. I can tell you more. But you have to be careful. She's more dangerous than you think. I swallowed hard, adrenaline spiking. Tell me, I demanded. Tell me everything. Meet me tomorrow, the old park on Westfield, noon. Bench by the oak tree. Alone. Then the line clicked dead. No name. No clue what they looked like. But they had information that could save me, or so I hoped. My heart pounded as I pressed the gas pedal, the city lights zipping past in a blur. My wife was forging my signature, siphoning money from under my nose, laughing with her secret boyfriend about my misery. But I wasn't powerless anymore. I had a tip, a chance to uncover the full truth. By the time I reached Logan's, my mind was a tangled storm of questions. Who was this informant? Why were they helping me? And most urgently, what was my wife's endgame? Because the deeper I sank into this nightmare, the clearer it became. She wasn't just having an affair. She was orchestrating a betrayal that could crush me financially, and maybe even land me in legal jeopardy, if I didn't move fast. Stepping out of the car, I exhaled into the warm night air. This was only the beginning. I would meet the mysterious caller, gather proof, and protect myself from whatever scheme my wife had concocted. Because I refused to let her and that boyfriend of hers laugh at my downfall any longer. I had a right to my own future, free from their twisted amusement. And if she planned to sink me with debts and forged documents, I'd fight back with every ounce of strength I had left. I clutched the duffel bag and headed toward Logan's door, a single thought resonating in my mind. Tomorrow, everything might change. I arrived at Logan's place well after dark, the headlights splashing across his modest brick house. He must have been watching for me because the porch light flicked on the moment I parked. My hands shook with a volatile mix of adrenaline and dread as I grabbed my duffel bag and headed for the door. Logan greeted me with a grim expression, gesturing me inside without ceremony. You look like hell, he said quietly, locking the door behind me. Did something else happen? Swallowing the knot in my throat, I set the bag on the living room floor. Yeah. I found home equity loan papers she's forged my signature on. And I got another call from that mysterious informant. Quickly, I filled him in on the cryptic instructions. The next day, noon, the old park on Westfield, alone. He let out a low whistle. You sure it's safe? Could be a trap. Could be, I conceded, rubbing my tired eyes. But I can't just ignore it. She's about to saddle me with massive debt or worse. If I don't figure out what she's really up to, I might lose the house, or end up in jail if she's doing something illegal under my name. Logan exhaled, scrubbing a hand over his closely cropped hair. All right. Stay the night here and tomorrow we'll figure out how to keep you safe. He paused, considering. I can come with you, at least watch from a distance. Gratitude surged in my chest. Thanks. That'd help. If it's legit, we'll get the info we need. If not, I shrugged, leaving the worst-case scenario unspoken. I spent that night on Logan's couch, my eyes drifting shut only to snap open with each rustle of the curtains or creak in the house. My thoughts whirled. What if the caller had set this up for blackmail? What if my wife or her boyfriend was behind the letters to lure me somewhere? But the alternative, staying ignorant while she forged my life away, felt worse. By dawn, I'd come to accept that taking this risk was my best shot at breaking free of her manipulation. The meeting by the oak tree. The next day, Logan drove me to the old park on Westfield. It was a once thriving community space, now half forgotten, with benches chipped by time and rustling oaks that loomed over a grassy field. We arrived at 11:45, parking a block away. Logan insisted on walking part of the perimeter, checking for anything suspicious. The place was mostly empty, a lone jogger in the distance, an elderly couple feeding pigeons. It felt peaceful, which only sharpened the tension coiled inside me. I found the specified bench near a towering oak tree, its gnarled branches swaying gently in the midday breeze. My heart thundered in my chest, each passing second heightening the sense of anticipation. Logan positioned himself discreetly behind a cluster of low shrubs, close enough to intervene if things went south. At precisely noon, a figure emerged from a narrow path across the park. My breath caught. It was a petite woman wearing a baseball cap pulled low over her eyes, a simple hoodie and jeans. She carried a small messenger bag and glanced around nervously. When she spotted me, she approached, lips pressed tight, her movements cautious. I straightened, wiping my sweaty palms on my jeans, ready to spring up if this turned hostile. Without preamble, she sat on the bench beside me, but kept a respectable distance. She spoke in a hushed tone, glancing at me sideways. "I'm the one who called. And wrote the letter." She wasn't disguising her voice now. It sounded young, maybe mid-20s. "Who are you?" I asked, heart pounding. "How do you know about my wife's plan?" She gave a shaky sigh, eyes flicking across the empty field. "My name's Tori. You work at the dental office with your wife." She paused as though bracing for something. "I overheard things, phone calls, conversations with that boyfriend of hers." At first I kept my head down, but then she started bragging about how she'd found a way to get a huge sum of money and pin it on you. I slid down my spine. Bragging? To who? Tori bit her lip. To a couple of her so-called friends at the office and sometimes on her phone calls. She thought we weren't paying attention, but I was. She said you were clueless, that once the money came through, you'd be left holding the debt. Her gaze flicked to me. She mentioned forging your signature more than once. That's when I decided I couldn't just watch her destroy you. My blood roared in my ears. "So you sent the letter to warn me. But why all the secrecy?" She grimaced. "Your wife has some powerful connections. Her boyfriend is tied to some shady stuff. I didn't want them to find out I tipped you off. And honestly, I was scared you wouldn't believe me if I just walked up to you. I was also worried about losing my job, or worse, if she figured out I was betraying her confidence." I swallowed, the pieces tumbling into place. My wife's wealthy boyfriend, her new lifestyle that she never explained, the sudden debts. She'd latched onto something big, something criminal maybe, that was fueling her greed. "So she wants the house in foreclosure," I said, half thinking aloud. "And then she pockets the money from a home equity loan or something similar. She's forging my signature to do it. Once the bank and creditors come knocking, they'll see my name, not hers." Tori nodded, voice trembling. "That's what it sounds like." She said she'd skip town once the funds cleared. Some offshore account, maybe. She joked about it being the perfect crime because you'd be left with nothing. A quake of rage rattled through me, so potent I had to clench my fists to remain calm. "Perfect crime. Do you have proof? Anything I can take to a lawyer or the authorities?" She hesitated, then reached into her messenger bag. "I've been collecting bits of evidence. Eavesdropping on conversations." I printed out some emails from the office computer when she left it unlocked. They're between her and her boyfriend, discussing loan details, your personal info, and mentions of forging. I also took screenshots of a few documents from her cloud storage. It's not everything, but it might be enough to show she's committing fraud. A swirl of gratitude and apprehension whirled inside me. "You risked a lot to get this," I said, taking the folder she slipped me. Tori shrugged, eyes darting across the park. She bragged about it like it was no big deal. I couldn't stomach it. Especially when you kept showing up at the office with late mortgage payments, looking so stressed. Her face hardened. "It's not fair. You didn't deserve this." My throat felt tight. "Thank you," I managed quietly. "You have no idea how much this means. But you need to be careful. If she suspects you—" "I know," Tori said, exhaling. "I'll lay low. Maybe find a new job soon." She rose, glancing at her watch. "Look, I have to go. I hope you can use that evidence to protect yourself." "I'm sorry for everything." Before I could say more, she was already walking away, shoulders hunched, a solitary figure slipping through the overgrown grass. I clutched the folder like a lifeline, my heart pounding with a mixture of relief and terror. At last I had tangible proof. I wasn't alone in suspecting my wife's criminal intentions. I also realized Tori's well-being might hinge on me acting fast. The longer this dragged out, the more danger she could be in if my wife or her boyfriend caught wind of her betrayal. Logan appeared at my side. I couldn't hear everything, but it looked intense. "You had the folder. That your smoking gun?" "Yeah." My voice shook, but resolve flooded me. "Let's get out of here." The hammer falls. We returned to Logan's place, where I flipped through the documents in Tori's folder. My eyes widened at the brazen language in the emails. There were references to ensuring his signature looks legit, keeping him in the dark, and instructions for funneling loan proceeds into a shell account. Each line hammered home the truth. My wife had systematically schemed to ruin me. Logan cursed under his breath. "This is enough to bury her. You've got emails, instructions. She can't talk her way out of this." A wave of heartbreak mingled with righteous anger. So this is what she's become. My mind flicked to the memory of her scornful laughter as I struggled to pay bills, to the hush-hush phone calls, to that look in her eyes when she used to say she loved me. All lies. All overshadowed by greed. "Tomorrow," I said, voice grim, "I'm taking this to a lawyer. After that, the cops. She can explain herself to a judge." Logan nodded, offering a reassuring squeeze of my shoulder. "You're doing the right thing, man. Don't let her or that boyfriend walk all over you." Sleep didn't come easily that night, but the tension I'd been carrying felt more manageable, softened by the knowledge that I finally had a plan. The next morning, armed with Tori's evidence, I marched into a reputable attorney's office. The lawyer, a calm, sharp-eyed woman named Ms. Petrov, listened intently as I laid out my story and handed her the damning documents. Her brow furrowed, scanning the emails. "This is substantial," she said. "You have a clear case of forgery and conspiracy to commit fraud. We can alert the bank, halt any pending loan disbursements, and file a report with law enforcement. But be prepared for backlash." I swallowed hard. I've prepared for worse these last few months. I just want to stop her from ruining my life. Ms. Petrov nodded, pressing her lips into a thin line. "We'll move quickly. We'll also send cease and desist letters to the mortgage company, flagging the loan as fraudulent. They'll freeze anything she tries to withdraw." Relief coursed through me, tempered by the sting of betrayal. Part of me still couldn't believe my wife was capable of such malice. But the emails were unequivocal, her boyfriend encouraging her, praising her cunning. Now the law would see it too. That afternoon, I gave an official statement to the police, handing over copies of Tori's stolen emails. The detective on the case asked me pointed questions, verifying my identity and my relationship with my wife. My heart lurched each time I recounted the timeline, when I found out about her secret boyfriend, the letter, the phone calls. But the detective's solemn nod indicated he believed me. "We'll investigate promptly," he said, handing me a reference number. "You've done the right thing, coming forward before she could finalize any transactions." Walking out of the station, my shoulders felt lighter. For the first time in what felt like ages, I saw a path forward. She might fight back with lies or intimidation, but I wasn't alone. I had evidence, legal support, and the moral high ground. Tori's warning had saved me from a financial and emotional apocalypse. Confrontation and aftermath. My wife must have sensed the net closing in, because that evening, my phone exploded with messages from her. Missed calls, voicemails, frantic texts. "We need to talk ASAP. Where are you? Why did you freeze the account?" I ignored them, heart pounding. Let her sweat. She'd forced me into corners for months, laughing at my desperation. Now she'd face the consequences. By the next morning, I'd moved the last of my belongings from our home. My name might still be on the deed, but I couldn't bear living under that roof. I had enough to pay for a short-term motel stay while the legal gears turned. Sure enough, she showed up at Logan's place, pounding on the door like a furious storm. Logan met her on the porch, blocking her entrance. "Where is he?" she hissed, eyes wild. "He can't just cut me off. I have rights." "You lost your rights the moment you forged his name," Logan said coldly. "Now get off my property or I'm calling the cops." She spat a few choice insults, but Logan stood firm. Finally, she drove away, tires screeching. My phone buzzed again, voicemails laced with anger and panic. "She knows," I realized with grim satisfaction. The bank must have frozen her fraudulent account. The jig was up. It didn't take long for the police to act. Just a few days after I filed my statement, I received news that she and her boyfriend were both taken into custody for questioning. Tori's evidence proved vital, and the bank corroborated my forgery claims, noting suspicious paperwork and inconsistencies in the loan application. A flood of relief crashed over me as I pictured them scrambling to explain their perfect crime. For a while, everything felt surreal. My lawyer guided me through the labyrinth of paperwork and hearings. My wife's secret boyfriend turned out to have a track record of small-time cons, now upgraded to major fraud. She'd aligned herself with a man who saw her as a ticket to easy money. Together, they'd plotted to siphon as much as possible, then vanish. I could almost hear their laughter echoing from that day I first glimpsed them together. Only now, it was replaced by silent scorn from a courthouse bench. Eventually, the court ordered restitution. Though it might be years before I see a cent, the moral victory was enough for me. The house, which I'd fought so hard to keep, remained in my name alone, with the fraudulent loan nullified. When the dust settled, I emerged battered but not broken. Tori testified on my behalf, and though she lost her job at the dental office, she found new employment elsewhere, away from my wife's toxic influence. It wasn't easy, healing never is. Nights brought nightmares of betrayal, of that mocking laughter. I replayed old conversations, moments where I tried to save a sinking marriage, oblivious to her deception. But as time passed, I found solace in small victories, paying the mortgage on time, reclaiming my living space, forging new friendships that reminded me people could be good too. Logan's unwavering support anchored me. He never said "I told you so" or demanded gratitude, but I made sure to show it anyway. Tori and I stayed in occasional contact, exchanging updates on how life was getting better. She admitted she'd been terrified to speak up, but seeing me nearly drown in debt and despair pushed her to do the right thing. One evening, long after the legal battles ended, I stood in the living room of my reclaimed home, gazing at the quiet space. Gone were the memories of her scornful smile and that boyfriend's hushed footsteps on the floorboards. The house felt lighter, as though purged of the darkness she tried to inflict. There was still a bruise on my heart, a cautiousness that came with betrayal, but I reminded myself, I survived. I endured her scheme, her laughter, her scorn, and came out the other side. That night, I sank into the old recliner, where I once slept in heartbreak, now a symbol of perseverance. A wave of gratitude filled me, not just for the evidence Tori provided, but for my own resilience. Life might never be the same, but a new chapter had begun, one where I wasn't defined by her betrayal. I took a deep breath, letting the past exhale from my lungs, and closed my eyes. She laughed at my struggles once, I thought, but I'm the one laughing now, not out of malice but relief. Because in the end, I found the strength to save myself from her twisted plan, and that triumph was worth more than any mortgage or sum of money could ever be.